I'm joined now by Elizabeth Wydra. She's the president of the Constitutional Accountability Centre. It's great to have your voice on this. You're well qualified to speak on it. I mean, there is so little trust in the electoral system in the US right now, particularly from the right, but also the left is worried Republicans and what they might do after Election Day. What to you is the fundamental reason for that mistrust these days?
Well, I think part of it is very intentional. We saw after the 2020 election efforts from particularly the Trump campaign to try to cast doubt on the election, even though all the evidence, everything showed that it was actually a free and fair election. And there are checks and balances in the system that make sure that everyone's voice is heard and that all the votes are counted properly and that only eligible voters are the ones who are actually voting. But all of this misinformation that's put out, and then in addition, these lawsuits that are filed, which aren't necessarily filed because there are facts to support them or because they think they're going to prevail, but because the simple fact of the lawsuit being filed helps to create that mistrust, helps to say, hey, look, if there's smoke, maybe there's fire, when actually there is no fire. There is a free and fair election being held. That takes time and takes a lot of effort, but there are those checks and balances.
So has enough been done, particularly post January 6th, to shore up the institutions and guardrails? I mean, what if Republicans stall certification of results, even in states that Harris wins, past that December deadline, which they tried to do last time, and then the Republican-controlled House could declare Trump the winner? Could that happen, and could more have been done to circumvent potentially impactful tactics this time around?
Well, Congress has passed a law since the 2020 election that tries to shore up the safeguards against something like that happening, that tries to make sure that the electoral count goes smoothly and that it can't be abused in that way. You know, obviously, this is going to be a real test of that. And so we will see. But literally, our democracy depends on it. And the voices of the people who are casting their ballots and deserve to be heard depend on the system working. And, you know, we learned a lot from the January 6th investigation about how the Trump campaign, even before they knew they lost the election, intended to pretend that they didn't lose it to try to hold on to power. And so I think people are prepared for that. And they've already seen this playbook to a certain extent. So there can be some preparations made, and judges are ready, electoral workers are ready, and hopefully that the system will make sure that our voices are counted.
But to that point, I mean, you've taken part in cases before the Supreme Court. We know what happened with Bush v. Gore in 2000. Do you think the American public expects the current Supreme Court to be nonpartisan if this 2024 election ends up before the justices? And it could.
Yes, and we've already seen some cases, not, of course, at the level of Bush v. Gore, but even in this election, there's been a case where the Supreme Court, on what's called its shadow docket, allowed a Virginia purge of voters to go forward, even this close to the election. There was another case where the court ruled in favor of allowing provisional ballots in Pennsylvania to be counted. So already cases are coming to the Supreme Court. But you raise an excellent point. The public's trust in the Supreme Court as a neutral arbiter of justice has gone significantly down after they overturned Roe versus Wade. And it's been building for a long time. Bush v. Gore, was 20-something years ago, but there have been decisions along the way that have eroded public confidence in the Supreme Court. And this is when we really do need a Supreme Court that follows the law, that has the trust and confidence of the public. And so that institution, having lost some of that confidence because of their decisions that a lot of Americans view as partisan, is problematic in this moment.
You focus on constitutional matters. What do you think the founding fathers would make of the state of elections, election integrity, and the tactics being employed these days by political parties and partisans?
Well, on the one hand, I think that they would be, mortified. But on the other hand, they knew very well the threats to American democracy. When they wrote the Constitution, of course, it was a fledgling democracy, and they knew that it was, in some ways, delicate. And so it's really a testament that we have this enduring constitution. Particularly, I think it's enduring because it's been amended over time to be more inclusive and more just and more egalitarian. But they wrote into the Constitution, protections that they hoped would keep us from democracy failing. But they knew that democracy was something that was fragile and that it was up to Americans to keep it strong.
Right.
So really the test.
We're right out of time, but I just wanted to very quickly, if you could keep it brief, what should Americans do on election night so they're not fooled by anything they see or hear? Real quick.
Yeah, that's a really great question. You got to make sure that your sources where you're getting your news are legitimate. Don't trust everything you see on social media. Make sure that you're getting news from diverse, varied, and legitimate sources.
Stay off social media is probably a good idea.
Probably, yes. Unless you're looking at like dogs or memes or something.
Yeah, exactly. Cat videos. Elizabeth Wydra, a real pleasure to meet you and chat to you about this. Thanks so much.
Thank you.